Chaos Sorcerer, Sorcerer of Chaos. They are to the traitor Space Marines what a librarian is to their loyalist equivalent. Sort of. Over the years, GW has released many models to represent these conjurers of dark magic, but in this video, I'm going to paint one of the old metal sculpts from the mid-90s and discuss their rules in 2nd edition 40k. Before I start the video proper, why not have a look at my Instagram? If you're into old Warhammer, then I think that's going to scratch the itch. Did you play 2nd edition 40k back in the day? Or do you still play it now? I wouldn't blame you if you did. I know I want to play more games of it given the chance. One thing that defines this edition is its psychic phase. A phase which hops in and out of editions of 40k, like a ferret in your trousers. In 2nd edition, there weren't just powers to cast on the roll of a dice. There was an entire minigame of cards. And these cards were used to represent the mental tug of war between those dabblers in the warp on either side of the conflict. To have a solid psyker in the game could give you an advantage. To lack one could be disastrous. Taking a Chaos Space Marine army, you had several ways to channel your psychic power. Demons, greater demons, and of course, Chaos Sorcerers. I've got this sculpt from 1996, a spiky-headed fellow bearing a plasma pistol and a wicked-looking staff. He's got some lovely flowing robes, some finely decorated power armor, and his book of spells. There's a lot of detail on here. Around his back he's got a curious-looking pouch, and a bit further round, a holstered bolt pistol. Typical of Chaos Space Marines, he's got more going on in the backpack area than Imperial Space Marines. But this is a smashing backpack. Not just the usual vents, but dragon's heads. You don't get much more metal than this. Games Workshop released some Sorcerer models during the release of the Chaos Space Marine Codex during 2nd edition 40k. The first was shown in White Dwarf 201 in 1996 and came with a force sword and bolt pistol for the fair price of 4 of your British pounds. All parts were metal, except the base. I particularly like the serpent head vents on the backpack, taking Pimp Your Armour to a new level. 2 months later, in November 1996, another Sorcerer sculpt was released. This time, the sculpt came with a force axe and bolt pistol. Again, with a different serpent-headed backpack, like he had ripped the prow adornment from a pair of Viking longboats. Another Sorcerer sculpt, the one I am painting, was released in January 1997 and shown off in White Dwarf 205. This time, the model came with a plasma pistol and force rod, or force staff I suppose, again with a serpent backpack. Each of these are beautiful sculpts, and they warm my heart in their own unique way. I love their flowing robes. I love the individual decoration and skulls on each one. Plenty of variation to suit your armies. Their helmets are unlike typical Chaos Space Marine helmets, and that makes me happy. I like the idea of a sorcerer arrogantly setting himself apart from his brother traitors. Maybe he locks himself away in seclusion, studying arcane texts and muttering with warp entities perhaps, while his comrades fight in sparring cages. I think strong narratives can be forged around these fellows, not necessarily leaders like Chaos Lords, but having significant influence, guiding the machinations of their warband with the promise of unlocking ancient weapons that will give them an advantage in war. The rules for the psychic phase in 2nd edition 40k are detailed, possibly more than any other edition of the game. This is not the video to discuss these mechanics. I hope to do a deep dive into those in a future video, along with the other nuances brought with the Dark Millennium supplement. Anyway, let's get on to painting the thing. A white prime from a rattle can is the first... Oh! Ow!
Are you okay, sweetheart?
I've just sustained this minor injury.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was...
Was it on a knife?
No.
Scalpel?
No.
Drill?
No.
Screwdriver?
No.
Paperclip?
No, it was...
Paper?
It was...
Toothbrush?
It was...
Lego brick?
It was...
Barbed wire?
It was this miniature.
I have no sympathy.
Anyway, a white prime from a rattle can is the first painting step, and for no good reason. Vallejo black is applied in 2 thin coats to a few areas. His backpack, staff, belt and other trinkets. A black base for the darker colours, and a white prime for those I wanted to be brighter. I mean, there was a good reason to paint these black. It was so I could get some easy highlights dry brushing on the Thunderhawk blue, which of course I did with my favourite Olivia Hale makeup brush. I could have dry brushed this later, once I had blocked in the other colours, but ham-fisted as I am, I would doubtless ruin these colours and waste my hard work. So I feel this was a clever time-saving step, but what do I know? Once that was dry, I went in again with a smaller dry brush, and using Fenrisian Grey, I swipe it perpendicular or thereabouts to the details such that only the raised areas get a little dusting of the grey. And to prove I still remember how to use a brush, I go in with my size 0 and a little Fenrisian Grey mixed with white for a few sharper highlights here and there. In this case on his gloves, which, coloured this way, remind me of gauntlets worn by equine vets. It's time for some blue. Flat Blue by Vallejo. I water this down and apply it to various parts of the armour. In this shot, I am working on the chest where the detail is heavy, a raised intricate pattern, which will be gold, with blue recesses. Blue and gold, you say? Why yes, for my sorcerer is a disciple of Tzeentch. Most of his armour is covered by robes, but the elbows at least are visible, and his boots. So these two shall be painted blue. I decided I wanted the cloth of his robes to be sandy, so naturally I go in with some Vallejo dark sand. I take care to get this under every fold and ruffle, because I don't want any of the white primer showing. You can see I have painted some of the helmet blue, but I also want a gold gradient going on here and not using metallic paints. To achieve this, I start with an old paint called Vermin Brown, which, despite being 20 years old or so, is still in good working order. This goes on the spike of his helmet, and on all the intricate raised areas on his armour and shoulder pads. I'm not sure what a modern equivalent paint is. Any suggestions in the comment would be appreciated. The end of the plasma pistol gets a coat of Vallejo orange red, diluted just a little to act as an orange shade for the next coat, which will be a red contrast paint. I have found that a white base leads to a pink tinge with this contrast paint, so I wanted to try an orange base instead. In the same fashion, the orb at the top of his staff is painted with orange red. And here's the next coat of contrast Baal red on the pistol and on the orb. Next, I took another contrast paint, Skeleton Horde, painting it liberally all over the cloth, to darken the tone and shade the recesses. Any schools get this treatment as well, ensuring the paint lingers in the eye sockets and between the teeth primarily. Here I am painting the cable Caliban green. I loved the way this and the subsequent shades of green worked with my Khorne Berserkers, and I felt this model would be another good place to employ this. And here I am applying dilute Caliban green to the plasma coils also. I returned to the areas I painted Vermin Brown and applied the next shade, which was a mix of Vermin Brown and Avalanche Sunset. I paint about 80% of the areas with this colour, leaving the remainder Vermin Brown. Some pure Avalanche Sunset is applied to the spikes on his helmet, just the top 2/3. Similarly, all the other areas I am painting gold get some Avalanche Sunset, covering slightly less area than with the last pass. This is the mid-tone colour. The next is a 50-50 mixture of Avalanche Sunset and Dark Sand by Vallejo. This is applied to about 1/3 of the gold areas. In the case of the spikes, that's the top third. For all the other gold areas, that's just the top part that would catch the most light. While that settles, I come in again with some dark sand and paint this on the raised portions of the folds of his cloak to bring back that original colour and begin the highlighting process. And with this colour still fresh on my palette, I use it to edge highlight the spikes on his helmet and the other gold areas too. If there are any rivets, these also get a dot of dark sand. On his belt here, there's a strange demon skull. The uppermost portions of this get a stroke or two of the old dark sand. Next, with a mix of dark sand and white, I brush some more highlighting onto the cloak. The strokes I use are short, sharp, and perpendicular to the folds of the cloak to make it seem more like fabric. I then repeat this whole process with pure white, using shorter strokes and covering a smaller area. Some Citadel Lothan blue is then applied to the edges of the blue parts of the spikes and armour, such as the elbows and the boots. Chaos Sorcerers are psychers for Chaos Space Marine forces, practicing dark arts with the unseen energy of the universe at their command. The Codex says that Space Marine librarians that pledge themselves to Chaos become sorcerers and are gifted with powers from their patron god. In-game, this is reflected by being able to choose from certain decks of psychic power cards, if you give your sorcerer a certain mark of Chaos. Sorcerers can be marked by Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Tzeentch, but not Khorne. Khorne has no time for sorcerers, only blood and skulls. A being of simple tastes. There are 4 profiles available for sorcerers. Sorcerers, who are level 1 psychers, Sorcerer Champions, who are level 2, Master Sorcerers, level 3, and Sorcerer Lords, level 4. Their level dictates the number of psychic power cards they can take at the start of the game. Each profile costs a little more than the others, and comes with additional stats for each level. I like the idea of purchasing a low-level sorcerer in a campaign, and then if he does well in certain games, bump him up a level. Chaos Sorcerers have a primary discipline and a tertiary discipline. Their primary discipline is one of the decks from Nurgle, Slaanesh, or Tzeentch, while their tertiary disciplines are Librarian and Adeptus powers. The Magus here, by the way, is from the Chaos Cult Army, which is also in this book. Neither the Magus nor the Sorcerer can take powers from 2 different gods, though. They have to stick with one. The army list entry states that they must take at least 1 card from their patron god, and the others come from the same deck or from Librarian and Adeptus decks. If they have no Mark of Chaos, they can only take cards from the Librarian and Adeptus decks. We'll have a look at the Chaos-only powers they can take shortly. And speaking of marks, both the marks of Nurgle and Tzeentch cost 20 points. Slaanesh costs only 10, because, to no one's surprise, Slaanesh is cheap. As standard, the Chaos Sorcerer comes with a bolt pistol, frag grenades, and power armor, but he can be upgraded to take any item from the assault weapons, armor, special weapons, and grenades section of the Wargear list, so you can give him Terminator armor and associated weapons, or if they have power armor, a melter gun and power axe for instance. There are many combinations available. They can ride a bike too if you like, but only if they are not wearing Terminator armor. Sorcerers can take 1 to 4 Wargear cards depending on which type you purchase. Clearly, the more points you sink into this, the more cards you get. Of course, since this is Chaos, for every Wargear card, you may take a Chaos reward instead. The rewards of Tzeentch are for sorcerers only. Breathe Fire, which is basically a flamer, Destiny of Tzeentch, which means in every psychic phase, cards are dealt to them first, and they can also cast the first power. The Disc of Tzeentch, which is an iconic Warhammer concept and means the rider can move over many terrain types without penalty. And it causes fear. I mean, who wouldn't be afraid of a demonic frisbee? The disc has its own profile and comes under the Cavalry umbrella with a movement of 12 inches. Then there's Fortune of Tzeentch, which is a nullify power that can be used every turn and always goes off on a 4+ regardless. A sorcerer belonging to the 1,000 Suns may have a bodyguard of 3 to 5,000 suns. That's 3 to 5 suns, not 3 to 5,000. Anyway, they are taken as per the entry for that squad in the squad section of the army list. In game, they fight as 1 unit. If you use the Dark Millennium expansion, and you really should for maximum flavour, the psychic powers you can use as a Chaos Sorcerer are as follows. Slaanesh. Fleshy Curse. Transforms a living creature into a warp spawn. Pavan of Slaanesh. Makes the target dance and howl uncontrollably, rendering them in game terms unable to move or shoot, or roll attack dice in hand-to-hand combat. Acquiescence and Beam of Slaanesh are similar powers, and they both make their opponents enter a rapturous euphoric state. Interpret that description however you will. One is ranged, and the other is against enemies in base contact. All characteristics are halved, and they become subject to stupidity. Nurgle. Aura of Decay. Models in base contact with the target of this power lose 1 from their attack's characteristic as they retch uncontrollably. My Plague Bearers had this in my recent game with Ed, hence his Death Company were less effective. Stream of Corruption. It uses a long flamer-like template. Living models at least half under the template are overwhelmed by the foulness of putrid blood, pus and maggots. Sounds like my student digs at university. They die if they fail their armor save, unless they are toughness 7+, in which case they take d6 wounds. Miasma of Pestilence. An area effect power dealing strength 3 hits to all living models within 6 inches of the sorcerer. Plague Wind. A ranged attack that has the potential to turn enemy models into Plague Bearers. Tzeentch. Tzeentch's Firestorm. An area effect attack that can turn enemy models into pink horrors. Boon of Tzeentch. Allows you to draw 2 more warp cards. Bolt of Change. A 12-inch ranged attack that kills a model outright if they can't roll under their toughness on 2d6. No armor saves are allowed. Pink Fire of Tzeentch. A 6-inch range attack dealing d6 hits at strength 4 plus d6. This was the power I got in my game with Ed, and I must say, I was quite disappointed. On reflection, I think the Nurgle powers sound like the most fun. I think my next sorcerer will take a mark of Nurgle. However, I should probably acquire more Plague Bearers, in case I draw Plague Wind. I think I actually cast Plague Wind a few hours after my last curry. What? We're getting into the realm of smaller paint quantities and finer details now, so my wet palette really earns its pay. On various chaos symbols, hanging from the belt and decorating the staff, I paint some Vallejo Royal Purple. The staff decoration seems to be some kind of imp's head. Any vibrant purple will do. This is then mixed with a dot of white and used to overbrush the raised areas of these symbols. And the gem on the chest as well. I wonder if he stole this gem from the Eldar. A little army painter gunmetal is applied to the chains to make them look like steel. I take my time so the recesses stay black, which acts as the shade. I thought metallic gold wouldn't fit in with the non-metallic gold I had employed here. When it came to shading the green cables and plasma coils, I mixed my own muted green using Caliban green and some white paint. With hardly any of it on my brush, I gently caressed the raised areas on the aforementioned sections. On the red orb of the staff, I wanted to have a crackling lightning effect. To that end, I painted some Vallejo orange red onto the orb, ensuring it didn't touch the recesses. Next, I mixed up some pale flesh colour and painted wavy lines using the tip of my size 0 brush. And to make it all pop, a white dot where the coruscating energy is coalescing. I do love talking dirty sometimes. I felt the cables were popping a bit too much, so I used a dark green wash to mute them a little. And it looks like we are done. Well, except for the base. But I finished this off camera. See any of my other videos, it's my usual tan earth top and army painter goblin green rim. While editing this project, I remembered from the timestamps of the video clips that this was all done in one day. It was clearly a focused one, with no chores assigned to me by the missus. Sometimes I even impress myself, and I am for sure my own worst critic, but suffice to say, I'm very pleased with how this Tzeentch-aligned sorcerer turned out. I love the combination of the gold and blue, which shouldn't be a surprise to you all, since you know how big a collection of ultramarines I have. But I enjoyed experimenting, such as using a different base coat before applying contrast, and doing all the dark areas first and then dry brushing. Finding new shortcuts and hacks like that, new to me anyway, is one thing that keeps me motivated in painting. It's rare I sit down and paint a whole army the same in one go. I need palette cleansers like this, excuse the pun, to break things up. Anyway, you might have seen this guy already in the Minisodes battle report where my Chaos Army fought Ed's Blood Angels. Suffice it to say, he didn't do anything spectacular, but he had a good time, running into cover and nullifying the odd psychic power here and there. I feel it's always worth having a psyker for that reason, for defence if for nothing else. So I always plan for one when constructing a 2nd edition army. But he got dealt pretty underwhelming powers, to be honest. So hopefully in the next game he plays he'll cast some cool energy bolt or summon some pink horrors or whatnot. And on that note, I think I'll need to find some pink horror models. And blue horrors. So this has been my first flirtation with Tzeentch, having added something Nurgle and Khorne to my ranks of heretics. And I plan to do more Tzeentch guys. As I make this, I am also painting a Thousand Sun, and surely he will get a video too in the near future. I also have a Greater Demon in pieces ready to assemble, the Lord of Change himself. And would you believe it, it's song time again. Beware the warp, a terrible place, not much like conventional space, yet some will dabble with twisted energy for psychic powers to fuel their treachery. Chaos sorcerers, psychers, yeah, dark incantations they prepare, furnishing boons or even a curse when uttering a forbidden verse. For lightning bolts and fireballs, the sorcerer shouts and caterwauls, but he runs the risk of being beaten, for by a demon he can be eaten. Chaos sorcerers, psychers, yeah, to his patron god he offers a prayer for demonic friends to aid his cause, or transport himself through spectral doors. Chaos sorcerers, psychers, yeah, before his power you will despair, unless you draw a nullified card, or power drain to force a discard. Chaos sorcerers, psychers, yeah, chaos sorcerers, psychers, yeah, chaos sorcerers, psychers, yeah, yeah.